"You want me to pay your tuition while you make out with him behind the welding shop," I yelled, and I slapped 3 printed photos across the diner counter. My girlfriend, Kira Lawson, froze with a coffee pot in her hand, her red nails tightened around the glass. Across the booth, her mother dropped her fork, her father's face turned hard. At the end of the counter, Dylan Reed leaned against the jukebox in his varsity jacket, grinning like he owned the room. Kira hissed through her teeth, "Lower your voice, Ethan." I knocked the top photo with 2 fingers. "That's you at 11:42 last night. That's Dylan's truck. That's his hand under your sweater." Dylan laughed loudly. "Man, you're pathetic. You took pictures like some broke little stalker." I turned toward him and stepped closer. "And you kissed my girlfriend like some coward who waits until I'm pulling 12-hour shifts." Kira slammed the coffee pot down. "You were supposed to work tonight. My spring tuition is due Monday." I pulled my grease-stained apron over my head and threw it on the counter. "Then get a job." Her mother, Denise, stood up so fast the silverware jumped. "Excuse me," I pointed at the photos. "I'm done paying. Tuition, books, rent, gas, beauty appointments, all of it." Kira's father, Ron, shoved his chair back. "You promised this family you'd help her get through school." I laughed once. "No. You all decided I would break my back so she could become a lawyer and leave town with Dylan." Kira marched around the counter and jabbed a finger into my chest. "You owe me, Ethan. I gave you 3 years. I caught her wrist and pushed it away. I gave you $38,600. The diner went quiet. Old men at the counter turned on their stools. A waitress stopped wiping a table. Dylan's grin slipped. Kira snapped loudly. "You counted." I pulled a folded paper from my back pocket and slapped it beside the photos. Every dollar. Rent paid from my account, her car repairs, her textbooks, her community college balance, cash apps to Denise marked temporary help. I counted all of it. Denise grabbed the paper and shouted, "This is private." I leaned over the counter and took it back. "Not anymore." Ron stepped toward me with his fists closed. "You better watch your mouth, boy." I didn't move. "Or what? You'll hit me like you hit your last landlord when he asked for back rent." Ron stopped. His jaw twitched. Dylan raised both hands, laughing again. "This is trashy, Kira. Come on, let the broke dishwasher cry." I faced him. "You told her I was too dumb for college." Dylan smirked. "Was I wrong?" I reached into my locker under the counter, pulled out my backpack, and unzipped the front pocket. I took out 2 envelopes and dropped them on the counter. One was my acceptance letter from State Tech's honors program. The other was a scholarship offer for engineering prep. Kira grabbed one and read fast. Her mouth tightened. Dylan's smile died. I said clearly, while I was washing dishes and paying her bills, I was taking night classes. I got in, full ride. Kira scoffed, but her voice cracked. "State Tech isn't Harvard." I picked up my keys. "You're right. It's step 1. Denise barked. "You walk out now. Don't come crawling back when she becomes somebody." I opened the diner door. Rain hit the pavement outside. I looked back at Kira, Dylan, and her parents standing under the buzzing neon light. Last time, I crawled. This time, I climb. Kira's face went pale. "What does that mean?" I stepped into the rain. "It means I remember everything." The door slammed behind me. Dylan's voice carried through the glass. "He's bluffing." I turned around, pressed my palm against the window, and held up my phone. On the screen was a paused video from last night. Kira's voice came through the speaker, loud enough for the diner to hear. Kira whispered in the video, "Once Ethan pays my law school deposit, I'll dump him." Dylan. "Stop laughing." Dylan's voice answered, "Make him work harder. Guys like him are born to carry people like us." Inside the diner, every head turned toward them. Kira rushed to the door and screamed through the glass, "Delete it." I slid my phone into my jacket. "Get a lawyer. You always said you wanted to be one." I walked to my old pickup, climbed in, and started the engine. Denise ran out under the rain, waving her arms. Denise shouted, "Ethan, don't be stupid." She didn't mean it. I rolled the window down 2 inches. "Monday is tuition day. Better start washing dishes." She slapped the side of my truck. "You little bastard." I put the truck in reverse. "Send me an invoice for that insult." "I'll reject it too." Ron charged down the sidewalk. Dylan stayed inside, dry and useless. I backed out, drove past the diner windows, and watched Kira stand under the neon sign with the whole town staring at her. At 5:30 the next morning, my phone started buzzing. Kira called 17 times, Denise called 9, Ron left 3. Voicemails full of threats. Dylan texted once, "You're dead." I walked into First County Bank when the doors opened. The banker, Mrs. Alvarez, smiled from behind the desk. "Ethan, you're early." I set my worn folder down. "I need to close the joint savings account." Mrs. Alvarez tapped her keyboard. "Kira Lawson is listed as authorized access." I nodded. "She's authorized to withdraw. I'm authorized to stop depositing." Mrs. Alvarez looked at the balance. "There's $12,480. I slid over my ID, "Move every dollar into a new account under my name only." She lowered her voice. "Any issue I should know about?" I placed the printed photos face down. "Just a bad investment." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "Understood." 10 minutes later, Kira burst through the bank doors in sweatpants and a hoodie, hair still wet from a rushed shower. Denise came right behind her with sunglasses on, though it was cloudy. Kira shouted across the lobby, "Ethan, stop!" The security guard turned. Mrs. Alvarez stopped typing. I didn't look away from the paperwork. Kira grabbed my sleeve. "You can't take that money. My tuition draft hits today." I peeled her fingers off my arm. "Your tuition, your problem." Denise pointed at Mrs. Alvarez. "Don't you dare process that. That money is for my daughter's future." Mrs. Alvarez replied calmly, "Ma'am, please lower your voice." Kira leaned close and whispered sharply, "You're embarrassing me." I pushed the folder toward her. "You embarrassed yourself in Dylan's truck." Her cheeks flushed bright red. People in line turned around. Denise snapped, "You want to ruin a young woman's education over one mistake?" I laughed and pointed at Kira. "One mistake? She planned it. She filmed me sleeping after double shifts and sent it to him. She called me her tuition mule." Kira hissed, "Shut up." I raised my voice. "Say it louder. Tell the bank why you need my money." The security guard stepped closer. Dylan walked in, wearing aviators and a clean jacket, trying to look calm. "Enough, man." I turned. "You brought backup to a bank at 9 in the morning." Dylan lifted his chin. Kira stressed, "You're acting unstable." I pulled out my phone, tapped play, and held it up. Dylan's own voice filled the lobby. "Get him to pay the deposit, babe. Then I'll take you to Boston and show you what a real man does." A woman near the teller gasped. The security guard stared at Dylan's jacket and then at his face. Dylan reached for the phone. I stepped back. "Touch me and the next video goes to your coach, your father, and the admissions office." Dylan's hand dropped. Kira whispered, "You wouldn't." I looked at Mrs. Alvarez. "Please finish the transfer." The printer hummed. Mrs. Alvarez handed me the receipt. "Account closed. New account created. Funds moved." Denise lunged for the paper. The guard blocked her with one arm. Security guard snapped, "Ma'am, step back." I folded the receipt and put it in my wallet. Kira's lips trembled, but her voice came out sharp. "So that's it. You're throwing away everything we built." I walked past her. "No, I'm keeping what I built." Outside, Ron stood beside my truck with a tire iron. He smacked it into his palm. "You think you can humiliate my family?" I held up my phone and pressed record. "Go ahead." Ron pointed the tire iron at my face. "I'll teach you respect." A police cruiser rolled into the lot. Mrs. Alvarez must have called. Officer Briggs stepped out, one hand on his belt. "Problem here." Ron dropped the tire iron so fast it clanged on the asphalt. I pointed at it. He was about to explain respect. Briggs picked up the tire iron with 2 fingers. "Ron Lawson, I told you last summer, one more parking lot tantrum and I'm not giving a warning." Ron raised both hands. "This kid stole from my daughter." Briggs turned to me. "Ethan." I handed him the bank receipt and the old joint account statement. "My wages, my deposits. No theft." Briggs read it, then looked at Ron. "Go home." Kira walked out of the bank, saw the cruiser, and covered her face. Dylan slipped behind her like a boy hiding behind his mother. I got in my truck. Kira rushed to the window. "Ethan, please, just pay this semester. I'll fix things." I started the engine. "You can fix them with Dylan." Dylan muttered, "Don't drag me into this." Kira spun around. "You said we'd figure it out." Dylan shrugged. "I didn't say I'd pay." I smiled through the windshield. There it was. First crack. First instant bill due. Kira slapped Dylan across the mouth. The sound snapped across the parking lot. Officer Briggs shouted, "Hey!" Dylan grabbed his face and yelled, "Are you crazy?" Kira screamed, "You told me he'd fold." I backed out slowly. Denise cried. Ron cursed. Dylan bled from the lip. Kira stood between them, already broken, already abandoned. That morning, I drove straight to State Tech and signed the scholarship forms. The admissions clerk, Mr. Graham, checked my papers twice. "You're declining the work-study placement at the cafeteria." I nodded. "I already know how to wash dishes, I'm here to learn machines." He chuckled. "Fair enough." I handed him my placement scores. His eyebrows rose. "Calculus, physics, technical writing, strong scores." I tapped the folder. "Put me wherever the hardest students are." He stamped the packet. "You start Monday." On Monday, Kira showed up at campus before my first class. She wore a cream coat I had bought her last Christmas, and carried a fake leather bag with the strap peeling. She blocked the hallway with her arms folded. Kira said coldly, "You're really doing this?" I kept walking. "Class starts in 4 minutes." She stepped in front of me. My enrollment got cancelled. The payment bounced. I moved around her. That's what bounced payments do. She grabbed my backpack. I turned and locked my hand over the strap. "Let go." She raised her voice so the students nearby could hear. "After everything I sacrificed for you." A guy with a skateboard stopped. A woman near the vending machine stared. I pulled the backpack free. "You sacrificed my paychecks." Kira's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this when I transfer out and become a real attorney." I pointed at the registrar's office behind her. "You couldn't pay community college tuition." "Start with that." Laughter scattered down the hall. Her face tightened. Dylan came around the corner carrying coffee and wearing a State Tech visitor sticker. He looked annoyed, not protective. Dylan said lazily, "Kira, we're leaving. My dad said you can talk to his assistant about a clerical job." She whipped toward him. "A job?" Dylan shrugged. "You need money, right?" I walked toward class. Kira shouted after me, "Ethan, don't walk away." I stopped at the classroom door and turned around. "Last time, I didn't. That's why I lost 6 years." The hallway went quiet. She stared like she heard something she wasn't supposed to hear. I went inside and took the front seat. Professor Milner walked in with a stack of exams, gray beard, oil on his sleeves, and no patience in his eyes. He barked, "Anyone here because mommy said engineering pays well, leave now." Nobody moved. He looked at me. "Name?" I answered, "Ethan Cole." He tossed a marker at me. "Board. Solve the load distribution problem from the packet." A few students snickered. I walked to the board, wrote the equations, crossed out the trap answer, and circled the final number. Milner stared. "Where'd you learn that?" I capped the marker. "Forklift frame repair, scrap yard, night classes." Milner nodded once. "Sit down, you might survive." At lunch, 2 students from Dylan's circle found me outside the machine shop. Mason, tall, clean boots, soft hands, blocked the door. Mason smirked. "Dishwasher boy thinks he's an engineer now." His friend Caleb held up his phone. "Kira said you're abusive. Said you controlled her money." I wiped my hands with a rag. "Post that." Caleb blinked. "What?" I stepped closer. "Post it with your name. I'll reply with bank records and the video." Mason scoffed. "You threatening us?" Professor Milner's voice cracked from behind them. "No, I am." Mason turned. Milner pointed at the exit. "Visitors leave. Students get to class. Idiots get reported." Caleb lowered his phone. Mason muttered, "This isn't over." I looked at him. "For you, it never started." By November, I had 3 jobs that didn't own me. I repaired motors at the campus lab, welded broken farm equipment on weekends, and tutored physics for cash. Kira's calls slowed down after I blocked her. Her emails started with rage, shifted to apologies, then turned into invoices disguised as emergencies. Car insurance, dental bill, one last textbook. I forwarded everyone to a folder named "Not Mine." In December, the first real public hit came at the winter donor mixer. State Tech held it in the old gym, with plastic tablecloths, coffee urns, and local business owners wearing suits they hated. I came wearing my cleanest shirt. Milner waved me over to a table where a man with a shaved head and steelworker hands stood beside a woman in a navy blazer. Milner said, "Ethan, this is Grant Wallace, Wallace Tool and Die. He funds the Applied Robotics Prize." Grant shook my hand hard. "Milner says you can rebuild a servo with junk parts." I answered, "If the junk isn't lying." Grant laughed. "Machines lie less than people." A familiar voice cut in behind me. Denise Lawson said sweetly, "Ethan, sweetheart, there you are." I turned. Denise wore too much perfume and a red dress with the tag tucked badly near the collar. Kira stood beside her, stiff and angry. Dylan stood behind them, bored. Denise grabbed my arm like we were family. "We've been looking everywhere for you." I removed her hand. "That's not true, you knew where I worked when you needed money." Grant looked from her to me. Denise smiled at him. "We practically raised Ethan. He and my daughter are still working." Through a lover's spat, Kira lifted her chin. "We were engaged," I said flatly. "No ring, no wedding date, no shared lease, just bills." Dylan coughed into his fist. Denise's smile hardened. "Ethan gets dramatic, young men do." Grant's eyes narrowed. "Is this a family matter?" I said. "No, it's a donor event." Kira stepped closer and lowered her voice, but the table could hear every word. "I need you to tell the financial aid office you withdrew support without warning. If you write a hardship letter, I can get reinstated." I picked up a cup of coffee. "You want me to write that I stopped paying after you cheated?" Kira snapped. "Don't say that here." Dylan rolled his eyes. "This is why nobody likes blue-collar guys at professional events." Grant set his cup down. "What did you say?" Dylan straightened. "Nothing, sir." Grant pointed at my hands. "Those blue-collar hands fix machines your daddy's dealership can't diagnose." Dylan blinked. "I didn't mean." Grant cut him off. "Yes, you did." Denise tried to laugh. "Kids, right?" Grant looked at Kira. "You're the girl who lost tuition because he stopped paying." Kira's mouth opened. No sound came out. Grant turned to me. "You looking for summer work?" I answered. "Yes, sir." Grant pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to me. "Paid internship, $28 an hour. You earn it, you keep it." Kira gasped. "You're hiring him?" Grant looked at her like she was a bent screw. "I hire people who show up." Dylan muttered. "My father knows Grant." Grant smiled without warmth. "Your father owes my company $90,000 on unpaid fleet repairs." Dylan's face went white. The donors nearby went silent. Grant tapped the card against my chest. "Call Monday." Denise dragged Kira away by the elbow. Dylan followed. No longer bored, Milner leaned toward me and grunted. That was better than dessert. Summer came with heat, welding burns, and real money. Wallace Tool and Die put me on the floor, not in an office. Grant didn't care about speeches, he cared about output. On my third week, a CNC line jammed during a rush order for hospital equipment. The floor supervisor, Brad, shouted over the alarm, "Kill the line." A senior tech yelled back, "If we kill it, we miss the contract deadline." I opened the guard panel and saw the feeder arm stuttering. Brad snapped, "In turn, back off." I pointed at the actuator. "Sensor bracket is loose, it's reading ghost position." Brad barked, "You see that from 8 feet away?" I grabbed a wrench. "I see it because it's shaking." Grant came from the office fast. "What's the hold?" Brad shouted. "Line jam." I stepped in. "Give me 90 seconds. Brad blocked me. "No intern touches live equipment." Grant looked at me. "Can you fix it locked out?" I nodded. "Kill power to module 4 only. Keep the rest staged." Grant yelled. "Do it." Brad cursed but hit the lockout. I reached in, tightened the bracket, reset the sensor, and tapped the housing. "Run slow." The feeder arm moved clean. The alarm stopped. The line lead whistled. Grant looked at Brad. "What was your plan?" Brad wiped sweat from his head. "Full shutdown." Grant pointed at me. "His plan saved 6 hours. A voice behind us sneered. "Beginner's luck." I turned. Dylan Reed stood in steel-toe boots too clean to be real. Visitor badge clipped crooked. Grant frowned. "Why are you on my floor?" Dylan forced a smile. "My dad sent me to talk about the fleet bill." Grant said, "Then talk." In the office, Dylan looked at me. "Didn't know you were playing mechanic here." I held up the wrench. "This isn't play, that's why you're watching." Brad laughed under his breath. Dylan's ears went red. In Grant's office, through the glass, I saw Dylan sit with his knees bouncing while Grant laid invoices in front of him. By the end of summer, Dylan's father's dealership lost the service discount, lost the parts credit, and lost face. Kira heard about my internship from somebody at the diner and showed up outside the factory gate in August. Her hair was shorter, her nails plain, and her car had a dented bumper. She stood near the security booth holding a paper cup. Guard Walt called my name. "You got a visitor." I came out with my lunchbox. Kira gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kira said softly, "You look different." I answered, "I'm working." She held out the cup. "Black coffee, like you used to drink." I didn't take it. "What do you want?" her smile cracked. Can we talk like adults? I pointed at the gate camera. Talk. She glanced at the guard. Not here. Walt snorted and went back into the booth. Still listening, Kira hugged the cup with both hands. Dylan and I are done. I said nothing. She continued faster. He lied about Boston. He lied about helping me. His father cut him off after the dealership mess. He's moving to Florida with some girl from his gym. I opened my lunchbox and took out a sandwich. Sounds busy, Kira's eyes flashed. Don't be cruel. I took a bite. You came to my job during lunch? Be clear. She pulled an envelope from her bag. I got accepted into a paralegal certificate program. It's cheaper, only $4,200. Walt coughed loudly from the booth. I chewed, swallowed, and wiped my mouth with a napkin. Congratulations. Kira pushed the envelope toward me. I need a cosigner. I laughed so hard the guys near the smoking area turned around. Kira's face tightened. You don't have to laugh. I pointed at the envelope. You drove here to ask the man you cheated on to cosign debt for you. She whispered sharply. You said you loved me. I closed the lunchbox. I said a lot before I learned the price. She stepped closer. Ethan, please. My mom says we can rebuild. You're doing well now. I can help you look professional. I can go with you to events. I know how to talk to people. Grant walked out of the main door behind me. He talks fine. Kira jumped. Grant looked at the envelope in her hand. Loan papers. She tried to smile. Just personal. Grant's voice stayed even. Personal trouble follows people into professional places. Don't bring it to my gate again. Kira's eyes filled with tears, but her voice went bitter. So now you have rich men protecting you. I threw my sandwich wrapper in the trash. No. I have boundaries and a paycheck. She shoved the envelope back into her bag. You'll come back when Harvard rejects you. Grant's eyebrows lifted. I said, I haven't applied yet. Kira sneered. Exactly. She turned and walked to her dented car. Walt leaned from the booth and called out, Ma'am, your coffee. She threw the cup into the lot. It burst on the asphalt. Walt looked at me. That one's got invoice written all over her. Grant nodded toward the plant. Back to work. Harvard. I spent the next 3 years doing exactly that. Work, class, exams, machines, applications. No speeches, no begging, no paying anyone else's bills. State Tech sent me to a national robotics competition in Pittsburgh. Our team's prototype beat 14 universities with cleaner code, cheaper parts, and a frame I welded after midnight. A judge from MIT asked who designed the load-bearing assembly. My teammate Jalen pointed at me. Ethan built it after the first one cracked. The judge looked at my badge. State Tech. I answered, yes, sir. He tapped the frame. Good work. At the awards table, Mason from freshman year appeared in a blazer, now representing a private university team that had placed 9th. He stared at the trophy in my hand. Mason said stiffly, guess Milner's pet finally got lucky. Jalen laughed. Lucky built a robot that smoked yours. Mason's jaw tightened. Enjoy trade school fame. A woman in a Harvard engineering polo, Dr. Celia Hart, walked up behind him. Trade schools build half the world. Mr. Mason, what have you built? Mason turned red. I didn't mean, Dr. Hart looked at me. Ethan Cole. I nodded. She handed me a card. Your design review was blunt. I like blunt. Apply to our transfer research fellowship. Mason stared at the Harvard crest on her shirt. Jalen slapped my shoulder. Say something smart. I held the card. Thank you. I will. Mason walked away without another word. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Heard you met Harvard people. Don't forget who believed in you first. Kira. I showed it to Jalen. He read it and barked. Block a new number. Champ. I did. The next year, Grant promoted me from intern to junior process engineer while I finished my degree. At the company announcement, Brad, the supervisor who used to block me, shook my hand in front of the floor crew. Brad said loudly, I was wrong about you. I answered, you were loud about it. The crew laughed. Brad nodded. Fair. Grant handed me a new badge, salary, benefits, tuition support. Don't embarrass me. I clipped it on. Wouldn't dare. The same week, Ron Lawson came to Wallace Tool and Die wearing a cheap suit and carrying a cardboard box of sample parts. Reception called upstairs. Ethan, there's a vendor asking for you by name. I came down with Grant. Ron stood in the lobby under the framed safety awards, sweating through his collar. His smile looked painful. Ron said, Ethan, long time. I folded my arms. Not long enough. Grant glanced at me. You know him, I answered. Former future-in-law. Threatened me with a tire iron at a bank, Ron laughed. Too hard, misunderstanding, family emotions. Grant's face went flat. You brought parts. Ron opened the box. Small machining jobs. My cousin's shop can underbid your current vendor. I picked up one part and turned it under the light. Burrs on the edge. Bad tolerance. Cheap metal. I set it down. Reject. Ron's smile died. You didn't measure it. I pointed to the corner. I can feel the burr. Your heat treat is uneven. Your quote is cheap because your product fails. Ron leaned closer and whispered, don't make this personal. I raised my voice. It became professional the moment you brought bad parts into this lobby. Grant picked up another piece, checked it, and dropped it back into the box. No bid. Ron's face darkened. You think you're better than us now. I looked at his cheap suit, the box of bad parts, and the sweat running down his temple. No, I'm better than your work. Reception went silent. Ron grabbed the box and stormed out, through the glass doors. He kicked the curb and nearly dropped the samples. Grant watched him leave. You handled that clean, I answered. Cleaner than he deserved. The Harvard application took 4 months. Transcripts, essays, recommendation letters, interview, portfolio. No fancy origin story. Machines fixed, systems improved, cost reduced, teams led. Dr. Hart interviewed me by video with 2 faculty members and 1 industry advisor. Dr. Hart said, your path is unusual. I answered, it works. The advisor leaned forward. You have lower formal research exposure than some candidates. I lifted a binder full of plant reports. I reduced scrap by 18%, downtime by 11%, and built a low-cost robotic sorting arm from rejected components. That's research with a time clock. One professor smiled. That is one way to put it. The advisor nodded slowly. And why Harvard? I said. Because I want to build systems for workers who don't have clean labs, big budgets, or second chances. Dr. Hart tapped her pen. Good answer. In March, the email came while I was on the factory floor. Grant was arguing with a supplier near the loading dock. Brad was yelling at a forklift driver. Jalen, now working beside me, pointed at my phone vibrating on the workbench. That looks official. I wiped my hands and opened it. Harvard School of Engineering, admission offer, full fellowship, fall term. I read the first line out loud. Jalen grabbed my shoulders and shook me like a busted machine. Say it again. Grant looked over. What happened? I held up the phone. Harvard. The floor erupted. Men slapped tables. Someone hit the horn on a forklift. Brad yelled, our boy's going Ivy. Grant shook my hand with both of his. You earned it, I said. I'll finish the automation upgrade before I leave. Grant snapped. Damn right you will. By 5 p.m., the news had hit town. By 6, Kira was outside my apartment building. She wore a black dress, heels too high for the cracked sidewalk, and makeup that couldn't hide the tired lines around her mouth. Denise sat in an old sedan at the curb. Ron wasn't there. Kira held a bottle of wine I recognized because I used to buy the cheap version for anniversaries. Kira said softly, congratulations. I kept my keys in my hand. How did you get my address? She looked down. Your aunt posted about Harvard online. I unlocked the building door but didn't open it. What do you want? She lifted the wine. To celebrate you. I looked past her at Denise in the car. Denise gave a tiny wave, like she hadn't screamed at me in a bank. Kira stepped closer. I was wrong. I waited. She swallowed. About Dylan. About school. About you. I was young. I pointed down the street. You were 23. She flinched. I'm not proud of it. Denise got out of the car and hurried over. Denise said brightly, Ethan, sweetheart, we always knew you were special. I laughed. You called me a bastard in a bank parking lot. Denise's smile froze. Families say things. I opened my phone and tapped the old audio. Denise's voice played from the speaker. You little bastard. A neighbor on the stairs looked down and laughed. Denise's face twisted. You recorded that too. I put the phone away. I learned documentation early. Kira touched my arm. I stepped back. She whispered, I need help. There it was. No celebration. No apology. Help. I nodded toward the curb. Say it straight. Her eyes shone under the porch light. I got into a legal assistant program in Boston. Not Harvard, but close. I could move there when you go. We could start over. I can work. I can support you emotionally. Denise jumped in. And housing is so expensive there. it makes sense for two people to share. I stared at both of them. You want to move to Boston with me so I can pay rent while you chase another certificate. Kira's voice sharpened. Don't make it ugly. I stepped closer. It arrived ugly. Denise raised her hands. We're offering peace. I pointed at the sedan. You're offering a bill in a dress. Kira slapped me. The crack echoed against the brick. A neighbor shouted, "Hey!" I touched my cheek, then looked at the security camera above the door. Thank you. Kira stared upward and went pale. Denise whispered, "Oh God." I opened the building door. "I'm filing a report." Kira grabbed my jacket. No, Ethan, please." I removed her hand. "You came here. You put hands on me. You did it on camera." Denise began crying. "Please don't ruin her record." I looked at Kira. "Funny, last life, you ruined mine." Without blinking, Kira backed away. "You keep saying that. What does it mean?" A police cruiser turned the corner 8 minutes later. The neighbor had called. Officer Briggs stepped out again, older, heavier, same tired eyes. He saw Kira, then me, then Denise. Briggs sighed. "Same cast." I pointed at the camera. "She hit me." Kira sobbed. It was an emotional moment. Briggs looked at me. "You want to press charges?" Kira clasped her hands. Denise whispered, "Ethan, please." I said clearly, "Yes." Kira's mouth fell open. Briggs nodded. "Ma'am, turn around." Denise screamed, "No." Kira cried as Briggs cuffed her. Neighbors watched from windows. The wine bottle rolled off the step and cracked against the curb. I picked up my keys and went inside. The next morning, Dylan called from a number I didn't know. His voice sounded rough, older, smaller. Dylan said, "Man, tell Kira to stop saying my name in police statements." I poured coffee into a travel mug. "Lose this number." Dylan snapped. "She's telling people I manipulated her." I said, "You did." He went quiet. Then he muttered, "We were kids." I tightened the lid. "You were old enough to call me a mule." Dylan said bitterly, "You think Harvard makes you God?" I picked up my backpack. "No. It makes me busy." I hung up. Kira took a plea for simple assault and got community service. Denise tried to spin it online as a private misunderstanding between old friends. Grant's wife commented with 4 words, "Police reports are public." The post disappeared in 6 minutes. Before I left for Boston, State Tech held a small send-off in the machine shop. No ballroom, no fake smiles, just coffee, folding chairs, and men who smelled like metal and work. Milner handed me a battered slide rule in a wooden case. "My father used this in a shipyard." I took it carefully. "I can't accept that." Milner growled. "You can and you will. Don't get soft around rich kids." Jalen raised his cup, to Ethan, the only man who can turn a junk actuator into an Ivy League ticket. Brad shouted, "And still owes me $20. I threw a napkin at him. Grant waited until the room quieted. Wallace Tool and Die is establishing the Ethan Cole Applied Systems Scholarship. First award goes to a working student with grease under his nails and no patience for excuses." The crew clapped. I looked at Grant and said, "You didn't have to do that." Grant answered, "Neither did you, when you fixed my line." In 90 seconds, the door opened during the applause. Ron Lawson stepped in, thinner than before, gray at the temples, jaw tight. The room went quiet. Ron held a cap in both hands. "I'm not here for trouble." Grant stepped forward. "Then state your business." Ron looked at me. "Kira's mother didn't want me to come. Kira doesn't know I'm here." I set my cup down. "Say it." Ron's voice came out rough. "I was wrong." Nobody moved. Ron swallowed. "About the bank, about the tire iron, about you paying for her." I raised a daughter who thought love meant somebody else working. "That's on me." I didn't answer. Ron placed an envelope on the nearest table. "It's not everything. $3,000. First payment. I'll send more when I can." I looked at the envelope. Grant glanced at me but said nothing. Ron added, "I'm not asking you to forgive her, or me. I'm paying a debt." I picked up the envelope and handed it back. Ron frowned. "Take it." I shook my head. "Send it to the scholarship." Ron's mouth opened, then closed. Milner grunted from the corner. "Best use for dirty money is clean tuition." Ron nodded slowly. "I can do that." He looked around the shop, embarrassed but steady. "Good luck in Boston," I said. "Work clean, Ron." He nodded again and left. Brad exhaled. "Damn, didn't have that on my bingo card," Jalen said. "Man got patched." Grant looked at me. "You okay?" I picked up my coffee. "I'm leaving with my tools and no unpaid bills." "That's okay enough." Boston hit like a hard machine with no warning label. Harvard had stone buildings, glass labs, polished floors, and students who said, "summered," like a verb. I showed up with 2 suitcases, 1 toolbox, and Milner's slide rule wrapped in a towel. During orientation, a student named Preston laughed when I said I had worked in manufacturing. Preston said, "So you're like a non-traditional diversity pick." I looked at his loafers. "You're like a warranty claim waiting to happen." Students nearby laughed. Preston's smile twitched. "Relax, it was a joke." I pointed at his name tag. "So was mine, Dr." Hart saw the exchange and hid a smile behind her coffee. In the lab, the first group project nearly turned into a disaster. Preston got assigned to my team with a woman named Tasha, a former Navy mechanic, and Omar, a quiet programmer from Detroit. Preston showed up 40 minutes late, dropped a laptop on the table, and announced, "I'll handle presentation, you guys can build." Tasha stared at him. "You assigning work now?" Preston smiled. "I'm just being efficient." I slid the project sheet across the table. "You'll handle thermal testing." Preston blinked. "I don't do hardware," Omar said without looking up. "Then learn." Preston laughed. "You people are intense." Tasha stood up slowly. "You people." Preston raised both hands. "I didn't mean anything." I picked up a sensor rig and placed it in front of him. "Test begins in 5 minutes. He didn't move. I turned to Dr. Hart across the lab. "Professor, our teammate is declining assigned technical work. Do you want it documented now or after he tanks the schedule?" Preston snapped. "Are you serious, Dr.?" Hart walked over. "Very. This program documents contribution. Mr. Vale, test the hardware or find another team." Preston's face reddened. He grabbed the rig. "Fine." Tasha leaned toward me and muttered, "You always swing that fast." I plugged in the power supply. Waiting costs money. The project won top mark. Preston tried to present most of it, but Omar had already uploaded the contribution log. Dr. Hart cut him off halfway. "Mr. Vale, please let Ms. Brooks explain the heat failure she solved. Mr. Hamad explain the code revision, and Mr. Cole explain the manufacturing adaptation." Preston stepped back, jaw locked. Tasha gave the cleanest explanation in the room. Omar showed the data. I held up the modified bracket and said, "The original design assumed perfect conditions. Real floors shake. Workers rush. Parts get dirty. We built for that." After class, Preston cornered me near the lockers. Preston hissed, "You embarrassed me." I closed the locker. "You did that by showing up empty." He stepped closer. "My father sits on 2 boards here." I smiled. "Then he can watch you repeat the class." Preston shoved my shoulder. I caught his wrist, turned it down, and pinned his hand against the locker without throwing a punch. Tasha appeared behind him. "Bad idea. Boat shoes." Campus security arrived 3 minutes later. Preston claimed I attacked him. The hallway camera showed otherwise. He got probation. I got a warning for escalation language. Omar read the warning and said, "That means they liked you but needed paperwork." I framed it over my desk. In my second semester, Harvard announced a public innovation showcase. Companies, donors, media, alumni, Dr. Hart pushed our worker assist robotic arm into the finals. It used low-cost sensors and adaptive force control for small factories that couldn't afford million-dollar automation. Grant flew in with Brad and Milner. They wore suits and looked offended by the price of coffee. Grant slapped my back near the display booth. "This place smells like money and fear." Milner looked at the robotic arm. "Not bad." Brad squinted. "Paint's ugly." I handed him a screwdriver. "Fix it." Across the hall, Kira walked in wearing a volunteer badge. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked thinner, polished in a brittle way, like cheap chrome. Denise trailed behind her with a borrowed-looking handbag. Dylan stood near a startup booth wearing a sales lanyard, talking too loudly to a woman who looked bored. The 3 of them hadn't arrived together, but trouble rarely needed coordination. Kira saw the Harvard banner above my booth and stopped. Denise grabbed her elbow. Dylan followed her gaze and laughed without humor. Brad muttered, "Well, hell." The invoice convention arrived. Kira approached first. Kira said carefully, "Ethan, I adjusted the robotic arm's calibration." Kira. Denise smiled at Grant like she remembered being charming. "Mr. Wallace, how nice." Grant stared at her until the smile died. Dylan walked up, clapping slowly. "Look at this." Dishwasher to Harvard mascot. Tasha, standing beside the booth, turned her head. "Who's the discount villain?" I answered, old debt. Dylan pointed at the robot. So this thing is your big break. I pressed a button. The arm lifted a 40-pound crate smoothly and set it down. Without bounce, one of them, Kira watched the machine, then the crowd gathering around us. It's impressive. Denise jumped in. Ethan always had potential. We told him that. Brad laughed in her face. Lady, I never met you and I know that's a lie. Dylan leaned on the table. Careful, wouldn't want your toy breaking in front of investors. I moved his hand off the table. Don't touch equipment. He smirked and nudged the emergency stop with his elbow. The arm froze mid-cycle. Cameras turned. A donor frowned. Dylan lifted his hands. Oops, Kira whispered. Dylan, stop. I reset the panel, opened the diagnostic screen, and spoke into the booth microphone so everyone could hear. Good, live demo of Tampa recovery. Unauthorized stop triggered. System logs user interruption and resumes only after supervisor approval. I tapped the screen. The monitor displayed the event time and a camera still of Dylan's elbow hitting the stop. The crowd murmured. Tasha grinned. Smile. Discount villain. Dylan's face drained. A security guard stepped closer. Donor woman asked, was that intentional interference? I looked at Dylan. Ask him. Dylan stammered. It was an accident. The guard pointed at the exit. Sir, come with me. Dylan snapped. Do you know who my father is? Grant laughed. Broke dealership guy. People heard it. Phones rose. Dylan lunged toward Grant. I stepped between them. Security grabbed Dylan under both arms. He shouted while they dragged him away. You think you're better than me? Brad called after him. The robot is. The crowd laughed. Kira covered her face. Denise tried to disappear behind a poster. Dr. Hart walked up, saw the screen, and said calmly, excellent demonstration under adverse conditions. The donor woman smiled. I agree. How soon can this system be piloted? Grant leaned toward me. Say something expensive. I answered. 90 days with the right partner. The donor woman handed me her card. Call my office. Dylan's sabotage became the best sales pitch of the day. By evening, 2 companies asked for pilots, 1 foundation offered grant funding, and Harvard featured our booth in the official recap. Kira waited outside the hall after the event. Denise was gone. Dylan was probably still arguing with security. Kira stood alone near the revolving doors. Kira said, I'm sorry about him. I kept walking. She followed. I mean it. I stopped under the awning. You don't get to apologize for him. Apologize for you. She hugged her arms. Rain dotted the sidewalk. I used you. I said nothing. She continued. I let my mom push it. I let Dylan laugh. I thought if I got far enough, nobody would remember who paid for it. I looked at the street. A taxi honked at a cyclist. Kira's voice broke. I remember. I adjusted my bag. Good. She stepped in front of me. I'm working at a temp agency. I'm not in school. I'm paying fines. Mom's house is in foreclosure. Dad moved out. Dylan's startup fired him after the video today. Everything is falling apart. I said, that's not everything. That's consequences. She nodded, tears running clean lines through her makeup. Can you help me get a job? Not money, just a recommendation. I looked at her volunteer badge, the wrinkled dress, the old hunger in her eyes. No, she flinched. I said not money. I stepped around her. My name is not a ladder for people who kicked me. She grabbed my sleeve, then let go before I looked down. Did you ever love me? I faced her, enough to ruin myself. Once, she cried harder, and now, I opened the cab door. Now I read contracts. The cab pulled away with her standing under the awning, small under the big Harvard lights. The next 2 years moved fast and loud. The pilot system worked. Grant's factory became the first site. Tasha joined the project full-time. Omar built the control software. Dr. Hart helped us spin it into a company called Floorforge Systems. Not fancy. Not cute. Straight to the point. Tools for the floor. Our first customers were small manufacturers tired of being told automation was only for giants. We priced fair, installed fast, and trained workers instead of replacing them. The press liked the story, but the customers liked the uptime. At 29, I stood in front of a room of investors in a clean suit that still felt like borrowed skin. One investor with silver hair said, why not sell to a major automation firm now? I clicked to a slide showing 40 signed factories, because they'll bury the low-cost model and sell a luxury version. We build for the shops they ignore. Another investor asked, what makes you qualified to lead? I looked at Grant, Milner, Tasha, Omar. and 3 floor workers sitting in the back row. I know what breaks, I know who fixes it, and I know what happens when people with clean shoes design for dirty floors. The room went quiet, then the silver-haired investor nodded. We're in. Floorforge closed funding. We opened a Boston office and a training center back home. The Ethan Cole Scholarship grew from 1 student to 12. Ron Lawson sent payments every quarter directly to the fund, no notes, no requests, just checks. Denise lost the house after trying to refinance through a shady broker. She moved into a rented duplex and sold beauty products online. Dylan's father's dealership collapsed after unpaid debts, bad reviews, and a warranty fraud investigation. Dylan bounced through sales jobs, then got arrested for throwing a chair at a customer in a boat showroom. Kira worked reception at a strip mall tax office, then got fired for using client emails to pitch side services. Every update came from public places, court records, local news, people talking too loud in diners. I never had to ask. 3 years after Harvard, Floorforge held a hiring fair at the new training center in my hometown. The old warehouse had been cleaned, painted, and filled with equipment. Men and women lined up with resumes, work boots, and nervous faces. Grant stood near the entrance, older but still built like a steel beam. Milner sat at a table insulting applicants into better answers. Brad ran safety demos. Tasha supervised the robotic arm station. Omar hid from small talk behind 4 monitors. I walked the floor with a clipboard. A young guy with oil on his shirt said, "Mr. Cole, I don't have a degree." I handed him a skills test. "Show me what you can do." Near noon, the room quieted in a strange wave. I looked up. Kira stood at the registration table. She wore a plain blouse and black flats, no perfume cloud, no dramatic smile, just tired eyes and a folder held tight in both hands. The volunteer asked her name. Kira said, "Kira Lawson." Brad looked across the room and mouthed, "Oh hell." Grant moved beside me. "Your call." Kira saw me and walked over slowly. She stopped 6 feet away. "I'm not here to cause trouble." I held the clipboard at my side. "Why are you here?" She lifted the folder. "Job fair." I looked at the line of applicants behind her. "For what position?" "Administrative assistant, entry level." Her voice stayed low. "I can type, I can schedule, I finished a bookkeeping certificate, I have references from the tax office before things went bad." Tasha approached from the robotic station, arms folded. "Things went bad how?" Kira answered without looking away. "I used emails I shouldn't have used. I got fired. No charges, bad judgment." Tasha nodded once. At least that was honest. Denise burst through the entrance behind her, ruining the moment like a tire blowout. Denise wore a bright scarf and carried a stack of flyers. "Kira, honey, tell him about your legal background." Kira turned sharply. "Mom, go outside." Denise ignored her and marched up to me. "Ethan, this family has suffered enough. You're rich now. You can give her one decent job." The whole registration line stared. Kira whispered, "Mom, stop." Denise pointed at me. "You owe her compassion." I handed my clipboard to Grant and stepped closer. "I owe this room fairness." Denise laughed bitterly. "Fairness, after you pressed charges over 1 slap." Kira closed her eyes. Tasha said coldly, "1 slap on camera is still assault." Denise snapped at her. "This is family business." Grant's voice boomed. "Not in my training center." Denise waved a flyer at me. "You built your whole story off humiliating my daughter. You made money because she made mistakes." I raised my hand and the room went silent. "No, I made money because I worked. She made mistakes because she thought work was beneath her." Denise's face twisted. "How dare you?" Kira stepped between us. Kira said loudly, "He's right." Denise froze. Kira turned to the room, cheeks red but voice steady. "I cheated on him. I used his money. I lied. My mother helped me excuse it." Dylan laughed at him. "My father threatened him." "Ethan doesn't owe me anything." Nobody spoke. Kira faced me again. "I'm applying like everyone else. If the answer is no, I'll leave." Denise grabbed her arm. "Have some pride." Kira pulled free. "Pride is why we're broke." A few applicants murmured. Denise looked around, humiliated, then slapped Kira across the face. The crack hit the room hard. Kira stumbled. Tasha caught her elbow. Grant pointed at Denise. "Out." Denise screamed. "She is my daughter." Security moved in. Denise tried to swing her flyers at them. They escorted her through the door while she shouted about betrayal and ungrateful children. Kira pressed a hand to her cheek. I looked at her folder. sit for the skills test. Her eyes widened. You're letting me apply? I said. Apply, not skip. Tasha took the folder. I'll grade it blind, name covered. Kira nodded. That's fair. She took the test at a folding table near 40 other applicants. She didn't get the administrative assistant job. Her score was average, and 2 candidates were stronger. But Tasha found one role in a partner nonprofit that trained displaced workers on basic office software, lower pay. No prestige, real work. Kira accepted it. She sent one email afterward, addressed to HR, not to me. Thank you for considering my application. No hearts, no memories, no bills. I respected that more than every apology she had ever performed. 6 months later, Denise was arrested for check fraud tied to her beauty product scheme. Ron continued sending scholarship payments and eventually got hired by a reputable machine shop after completing a quality control course at our center. Dylan got 18 months probation and mandatory anger management after the boat showroom incident. Preston Vale, the Harvard rich kid, tried to launch a copycat automation startup with buzzwords and no working product. At an industry expo, he approached our booth with 2 investors behind him. Preston said loudly, "Floorforge is basically charity robotics. Cute, but not scalable." Tasha smiled like a shark. "Your demo caught fire yesterday," Omar added. Twice, the investors looked at Preston. He stammered. "Minor thermal event." I pointed to our live installation dashboard showing 312 active systems across 9 states. "Scalable means running." Preston tried to laugh. "You always go for the throat." I shook his hand for the cameras. "Only when the throat talks first." The investors took our brochure and left his booth 5 minutes later. Another instant bill paid in public. At 32, I returned to Harvard as a guest speaker. Not a student in borrowed confidence, not a factory guy tolerated by polished rooms, a founder, an employer, a donor. Dr. Hart introduced me in the same hall where Dylan had tried to sabotage our demo. Grant sat in the front row. Milner sat beside him, pretending not to be proud. Tasha and Omar stood near the back arguing over a software patch. I walked to the podium and looked at the students. "I'm Ethan Cole. I paid the wrong person's tuition before I learned to invest in myself." The room laughed. I continued, "Build things that work when nobody is watching. Keep records, read contracts, don't confuse love with unpaid labor, and never let someone call you low class while standing on a floor your people built." The applause came hard. After the talk, a young man in a janitor uniform waited near the side door with a notebook in his hand. He looked 19, maybe 20. Young man said nervously, "Mr. Cole, I clean here nights. I'm taking community college classes. I don't know if I belong around people like this." I pointed at the notebook. "What are you studying?" He opened it. Diagrams, motors, bad handwriting, good instincts. I handed him a card. "Send me your work, not your doubts." He grinned like somebody had opened a door. Outside, snow started falling over the yard. My phone buzzed. A message from Kira. First direct message in years. "I saw the talk online. You were right to leave. I hope the scholarship helps people better than I treated you. No request, no hook, no old nickname." I typed back 2 words. "It does." Then I blocked the number. Grant came out beside me, collar turned up against the cold. "You finally done carrying that?" I slid the phone into my coat. "Yeah." He nodded toward the street. "Cars waiting, big meeting tomorrow." I looked back once at the lit windows, the students moving inside, the workers clearing snow from the steps, the machines in labs humming behind glass. Last time, I had worked 6 years to buy Kira a future, and she had spent it on another man. This time, I spent those years on steel, code, clean contracts, and people who showed up. The bill came due for everyone. Dylan lost the grin, Denise lost the house, Preston lost the room, Kira lost the free ride and finally learned the price of work. I gained a company, a name, a scholarship, and a life nobody could withdraw from my account. Grant opened the car door and grinned. "Harvard man, you getting in or admiring the weather?" I picked up my toolbox, stepped off the curb, and laughed. "I'm getting in, I've got work in the morning."